Her name was Talia, but everyone called her Sleeping Beauty. It had been 5 years since the new queen was brought to the castle. Robert, the royal cook, still found her story fascinating and alarming in equal measure. Unlike the other servants, he did not make a habit of gossiping about the matter, but he replayed the story in his head multiple times. 105 years ago, Sleeping Beauty's father and mother, king and queen of the neighboring land, held a grand feast in celebration of their child's birth. The parents concerned themselves about the child's appearance more than her well-being, dressing the baby in heavy jewels and rough cloth made to impress rather than comfort. 7 fairies were ordered to attend the feast and bless the newborn. The oldest of the fairies had grievances with the family, as she was disrespected by them in the past. The king invited her anyway, since he would not deprive himself of a blessing that would elevate his bloodline. One by one, each fairy approached the crib to offer their blessing. However, the king and queen did not let the fairies choose their own gift. The royal pair dictated what each blessing would be. Make her the most beautiful girl in the world. I will not suffer an ugly child. Give her an angelic voice. No daughter of mine will croak like a toad. Make all her movements graceful. A princess should not be clumsy, and so forth. The old fairy trembled with rage when it was her turn to approach the crib. She could not believe that humans had the gall to bully magical beings. Ignoring the demands of the king and queen, and not caring that the baby was innocent, the old fairy snarled, "When your brat turns 15, she will pierce her hand on a spindle and die." Enraged, the king pulled out his sword. "Take back this curse, or I will have your head," he demanded. "Then have my head," the old fairy said. "I will not take back the curse." With one swing of his sword, the king lopped the old fairy's head off her shoulders. He then ordered the 7th fairy, who had not yet given her blessing, to undo the curse. "I cannot completely undo the spell of my elder," the 7th fairy said, fearing for her life. "Your daughter will still pierce her hand, but she will not die. Instead, she will sleep for 100 years. Not satisfied with this lesser misfortune, the king ordered the destruction of all spindles. Anyone who refused to give up this tool was labeled a traitor to the kingdom and executed. 14 years passed without the princess ever laying eyes on a spindle. Though she knew of the fate destined for her, she was never allowed to voice her concerns. Mentioning the old fairy or the curse would get her whipped for distressing the queen or angering the king. On her 15th birthday, when her parents attended a party in a foreign land, the princess pricked her finger on a spindle and fell into a deep sleep. No one knows how this occurred. The princess claimed that, while wandering the palace in a state of boredom, she happened upon an old woman spinning yarn. Apparently this woman was unaware of the ban on spindles or the curse, so welcomed the princess to try the spindle herself when the young girl asked. This seems improbable, since the king's punishment for keeping spindles was known and feared in equal measure. It is more likely that she sought out a spindle, but to what end? Perhaps she hoped to conquer her fate, as if willpower alone could help her resist the old fairy's magic. Perhaps she did not want to spend the entirety of her teen years living in fear, so pricked her finger to get the curse over with. Or perhaps she welcomed the long sleep as a means of escaping her parents. Once her parents returned from their party and found their daughter unconscious, they used everything at their disposal to wake her. The king and queen begged doctors, magicians, and fairies for aid. Those who did not act out of pity were bribed to help. Those whose assistance could not be bought were threatened. The pleading, bribing, and threats led nowhere, as none could wake the princess. Appalled by their powerlessness, the king and queen developed bitter feelings towards the princess. Her magical sleep was a constant reminder of their failings, so they placed her in the cellar, bricked up its doors, and forgot about her. In the 100 years that passed, what remained of the royal family suffered misfortune after misfortune. Eventually they left the castle, believing it to be cursed. Thieves picked at the palace's innards like vultures. Though many attempts were made, none could enter the cellar. However, the multiple attempts to get into the cellar weakened the bricks. The princess's future husband entered the castle in the hopes of ransacking the cellar. He had a hunger for aged wines and refused to let mere bricks stop him from quenching his thirst. To his surprise, he barely needed to touch the barrier for the bricks to crumble out of his way. Once the dust cleared, his attention was captivated not by the barrels of wine or bottles of spirits lining the walls, but by the fair maiden placed in the center of the room. Time had not touched her beautiful face and luxurious clothes. overtaken by passion, he leapt upon her. 9 months later, the princess awoke screaming as she gave birth to twins, a boy named Sun and a girl named Moon. The father of the babies, who had been visiting the princess weekly, overheard the screams and rushed to her side. Once the delivery concluded, he explained that he was the ruler of the neighboring kingdom, and that she was to be his queen from this moment forth. And so he took Sleeping Beauty from the crumbling remains of the only home she had ever known. Few cared about how alien she felt after a century of slumber. She was constantly bombarded by strange phrases, odd fashion, and mind-boggling world events. The future was scary, and she was given very little time to adjust. Yet the king and his servants, blinded by their joy of having a beautiful queen, did not concern themselves with her distress. The royal cook and his wife, Rose, were the only ones who took pity on Sleeping Beauty and her children. They comforted her when she became overwhelmed. The cook gave the twins sweets whenever they started fussing, and his wife tended to them when the queen needed a break. Sleeping Beauty came to love the cook and his wife as her new parents, and the twins referred to the pair as Grandpa and Grandma. The king's mother disliked Sleeping Beauty and her children, but wanted Sun, Moon, and the queen to love her. She loathed the queen calling anyone else mother, or the twins calling anyone else grandma. Still, she knew if she got rid of the cook's wife, the cook himself would still be gifted the love she believed solely belonged to her. The king's mother stewed with jealous rage for years. When she could no longer tolerate her anger, she waited until the king left on a hunting trip so he could not protest her evil plan. Then she called the cook to her chambers. "Loyal cook," said the king's mother, "I wish to have Sun for supper tomorrow. I want his flesh on a plate with his curly hair as garnish." "My goodness," cried the cook. "Do it," commanded the king's mother, "or you and your wife will lose your heads." Concerned for his wife's safety, the cook took a knife from the kitchen and sought out Sun. When he found the boy, the little prince hugged his leg. In the sweetest voice, the boy asked for candy. The cook wept. He could not harm him. After bringing Sun to his wife and telling her to hide him in their lodgings, the cook killed a lamb. He roasted the meat, lathered it in sauces, and used its fur to garnish the meal. The king's mother made a mess of herself at supper time, eating with her hands and devouring the meat like a pig. She said it was the best meal she ever had. The next day, the king's mother demanded to have Moon for supper. The cook did not complain, deciding to trick the vile woman again. He brought Moon to his wife before killing and roasting another lamb. Though the king's mother was once again very pleased with her meal, her evil appetite could not be satisfied for long. "I want the queen for supper tomorrow," the king's mother told the cook, mouth covered with lamb grease. "I shall gobble her up, limb by limb, and leave her pretty little face for last." The cook was at a loss. He did not know what animal could fool the king's mother. None had the face of a woman, especially not one as lovely as Sleeping Beauty. Out of options, he decided to slay the queen. Believing her children were dead, the queen spent all day and night crying in her room. Overcome with pity, the cook was unable to attack while her guard was down. Instead, with all the respect in the world, he told her about the orders he received from the king's mother. "Then do it," Sleeping Beauty said, her sorrow leaving no room for fear. "Let me be with my children, so that I may finally know peace." The cook's heart broke. The queen suffered so much. Parents who cared more about keeping up appearances, an old fairy who used her as a tool for revenge, a man who forced himself upon her, a husband and servants who only saw her as a beautiful decoration, and a mother-in-law who only saw love as an ego boost. Throughout most of her life, no one cared for Sleeping Beauty. No one cared for Talia. If anyone concerned themselves with her welfare, she would have avoided so much pain. But the cook loved the queen. His wife loved her too. They could put a stop to her torment. "My good queen," the cook said through tears, "your children still live. Come with me." He then brought Talia to his lodgings and reunited her with the twins. When the king returned from his hunting trip, the cook's wife approached him in a distressed state. "My lord," she cried, "your mother has trapped the queen in the kitchen. Please talk some sense into her." The king rushed to the kitchen, followed closely by the cook's wife. Once they arrived, the queen and his mother were nowhere to be found. Before the king had time to realize he had been deceived, the cook, who had been hiding in a corner, pounced on the king and slayed him. As the cook roasted the body, the wife shaved the king's beard and put makeup on his face to disguise him as Talia. So ravenous in her vile hunger, the king's mother hardly waited for the cook to put the plates down before she began consuming the meat. She barely took a moment to breathe as she forced the food down her gullet. When she finally began eating the king's face, his nose got stuck in her throat. She tried to spit it out, but it would not budge. After a minute, her face became purple and she died. Though Talia now had full ownership of the kingdom, she had no interest in ruling. After allowing the castle to be taken over by the king's cousin, she departed to a faraway land with Sun, Moon, the cook, and his wife. The small family lived in peace for many years. When the cook and his wife eventually passed of old age, Talia placed these words on their shared tombstone: Robert and Rose protected the scared, who fought and who dared, who always cared. The original Sleeping Beauty is so messed up that it's actually funny that it's made for kids. But that's just the way old fairy tales were like. Considering how sanitized modern stories are nowadays, it's actually quite refreshing to go back to the old stories where they just did not care and and it would just make things as dark as they wanted it to be. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't without reason. They were supposed to give morals to children, but still, it's just funny. But I like it though, I do. I wouldn't change it for the world. If you want early access to my stories, follow me on Substack. Thank you and good wakey wakey! Ah, good. You're still alive. Humans can go, 2 months without food? So long as you have water? Yes, water is very important. Won't make that mistake again.